Welcome to Ruslan Belov's channel. This is our daily overview of the combat situation on the Ukrainian front. At present, the Iranian leadership has fully stabilized the internal situation in the country. For more than 2 days now, even slightly longer, no mass protest activity has been recorded. Nevertheless, despite this, the United States continues preparations for a potential use of force scenario. The reasons for this are quite obvious. The attempt to destabilize Iran internally has failed. Essentially, Washington has only one remaining option to pressure the Ayatollah regime: direct external military action. What this will ultimately lead to will become clear very soon, and we will be able to observe how events unfold in the near future. Meanwhile, Donald Trump made a statement yesterday in which he made it clear that the unwillingness of Greenland's residents to become part of the United States is solely their own problem. In simple terms, the opinion of the island's population, their will, and their preferences regarding state affiliation are of no importance to him whatsoever. If Trump believes that Greenland should be incorporated into the United States, he intends to make that happen. This is a vivid illustration of the fact that international law in today's global reality effectively does not function and plays no decisive role. There is no need for legal justification, references to norms, or attempts to prove compliance with international agreements. Things are done purely based on expediency. This is exactly how Trump operates, and by the same logic, Russia should follow a similar approach when defending its own sovereignty and national security. Let us move directly to the situation along the line of contact. Hostilities continue, and as usual, we will examine developments in detail. Over the past 24 hours, there have been both positive and negative reports. More precisely, there was only one negative episode, and it is not difficult to guess where it came from. Naturally, from the Kupiansk direction. What happened there? Overall, nothing critical. A limited advance by Ukrainian armed forces units was recorded in the central part of the city. Initially, a video appeared online showing a Ukrainian flag placed on the building of the Kupiansk city administration. This refers specifically to the city administration building, not the district administration. However, this facility had already been marked on maps as not being under Russian control. In other words, these images did not provide any fundamentally new information. There is, however, an important nuance. The Ukrainian flag was dropped onto the building from a drone, and corresponding video footage confirms this. Later, Ukrainian sources released additional images showing 2 soldiers standing in the square in front of the administration building, with one photographing the other holding a Ukrainian national flag. These images, however, also appear highly ambiguous. Take note, there is snow on the ground, yet no visible footprints, which looks strange, as footprints should inevitably be present under such conditions. This could be due to the quality of the images or other factors. In any case, it is difficult to draw definitive conclusions from these materials. Regardless, the administration building has not been under Russian control since December. Now, taking into account the presence of disputed yet still existing indications of Ukrainian forces on site, cartographers have marked the adjacent square and the cultural center building as territory controlled by the armed forces of Ukraine. As a result, Ukrainian forces have formally expanded their control zone in Kupiansk by approximately 130 meters in depth and 160 meters along the frontage. Fighting for the city continues, and we are closely monitoring developments. It should be emphasized that Ukrainian units are facing extremely difficult conditions here. I have seen extremely disturbing footage from the outskirts of Kupiansk. Russian drone operators detected Ukrainian armed forces' trenches and shelters and then struck them. Everything caught fire, including a Ukrainian soldier who was inside. He ran out of the shelter completely engulfed in flames, convulsively trying to extinguish the fire, but it was already too late. He effectively turned into a human torch. Thus, the situation in Kupiansk remains unresolved. Combat operations continue. Ukrainian forces are applying pressure within the city, while Russian units are actively operating on the left bank. Not only there, Russian fighters are also conducting offensive actions inside the city itself. Over the past 24 hours, advances were recorded not only by the Ukrainian side, but also by Russian units. While Ukrainian forces advanced by approximately 100 meters, Russian fighters advanced 270 meters in depth and 350 meters in width. 2 streets were brought back under control, as well as the building of Gymnasium No. 1, which had been used as a fortified position. Overall, the day was successful for Russian forces. More territory was regained than lost. Moving on. South of Kupiansk, Russian units advanced more than 2 kilometers. In the area of Nova Krulivka, an advance of nearly 2.5 kilometers in depth was recorded, with a frontage exceeding 4 kilometers. The settlement itself has not yet been taken, but the current configuration of the front makes it highly unlikely that Ukrainian forces will be able to hold the village. With a high degree of confidence, it can be assumed that within the next month, this entire pocket will be fully eliminated. The most significant advance, according to incoming objective control materials, was recorded on the Lyman axis. Russian units managed to advance 4 kilometers along the Siversky Donets River, effectively blocking the settlement of Prishib. This advance potentially addressed several operational objectives at once. First, it created a threat of blocking Yarova on the northern bank of the river. Russian positions are located to the west, north, and east, while the river forms a barrier to the south. The width of the potential exit across the river is approximately 2.5 kilometers. Under such conditions, there can be no serious discussion of logistics, supply, or rotation. Although there is no formal, complete encirclement, the possibility of a practical withdrawal across the river is extremely limited. Second, this advance allowed for a southern bypass of Drobyshev, with the prospect of reaching the Kolektivny railway station and subsequently entering Lyman from the western direction. Drobyshev itself has become a heavily fortified stronghold for Russian forces. Despite gradual pressure on Ukrainian defenses, progress there has been extremely difficult. Russian units reached the outskirts of Drobyshev back in early October, yet after 3.5 months, the settlement has still not been fully captured. Moreover, not even half of it is under Russian control. Ukrainian forces have turned this urban-type settlement into a true fortress, which is why a decision was made to bypass it from the south. Third, in the longer term, this advance could have created conditions for crossing the Siversky Donets River. If it had been possible to secure the Prishib area, further momentum could have been developed, including an attempt to push Ukrainian forces off the high ground near the Sviatohirsk Lavra. Losing control of those heights would have made it virtually impossible for Ukrainian forces to hold the city of Sviatohirsk. However, I deliberately use past tense formulations such as could have, allowed, and would have opened. The reason is simple. This advance did not occur over the past 24 hours, but back in November. The objective control footage showing Russian presence in forested areas east of Prishib is 2 months old. Ultimately, Russian forces were unable to secure and hold those positions. Consequently, the current map coloring in this area is incorrect, and the described front configuration does not exist at present. I understand that this may be disappointing, but the reality is what it is. The promising advance in November did not develop further, and cartographers misinterpreted outdated footage. We now move on to the Zaporizhia direction. After the capture of Primorske, Russian units have nearly reached the next settlement, Richna. All that remains is to clear a small gardening cooperative, part of which is already under control. Beyond the Konka River lies Hryhorivka. In this situation, the Ukrainian command will be forced to decide where to concentrate its reserves, either on the Zaporizhia sector or on the Orikhiv direction. The Russian army, operating with the same grouping of forces, gains the ability to conduct offensive operations simultaneously in multiple directions, which constitutes its key operational advantage. At the same time, the right flank of the advance toward Orikhiv is being reinforced. In Malotokmachka, Russian troops took control of the prison on the southern outskirts of the village. Fierce fighting had previously taken place over this facility. Its capture represents an important tactical success. Progress on this axis became possible due to the active operations of the Vostok grouping in the Huliaipol area, where a large-scale splitting of the Ukrainian formation is taking place. On the Huliaipol sector, Russian units are reaching the railway line running from Starokranka to Tizvitokne and are attempting to advance toward Verkhny Tersa, aiming to break through Ukrainian defenses on the watershed heights. In the future, this could lead to an entry into the rear of the Ukrainian Orikhiv grouping. In addition, persistent and prolonged fighting continues for Ternovate, where approximately half of the settlement is already under Russian control. On the Pokrovsk axis, positional fighting continues in the Hryshine area. Ukrainian forces attempted counterattacks north of Pokrovsk, in the area of the Druzhba Dacha Cooperative, north of the Hryshinka River. Russian units held their positions and managed to advance slightly. Further up the map, fighting is underway toward Belitske and Novyi Donbas. Russian units are attempting to secure positions west of the railway tracks, with tactical successes recorded in the Ivanivka area. To the east, the situation remains difficult near Torska. Russian forces pushed Ukrainian units off the heights west of Zaporizhia. East of Sofiivka, the Russian army is gradually reaching the approaches to Novopavlivka. The Kostiantynivka direction. On the southern flank, no significant changes have been recorded. Fighting continues in the areas of Berostok, Stepanivka, and within Kostiantynivka itself. To the north, the situation remains tense near Verolyubivka, where Ukrainian forces are actively counterattacking and control over positions repeatedly changes hands. The settlements of Klinova and Popasna are in the grey zone. Battles continue for Maiske and Markove, where the Ukrainian side holds key positions on the heights to the north. On the Sloviansk sector, units of the Third Army advanced west of Vasyukivka and secured positions in Nikiforivka. Fighting is ongoing in the Reznikivka area. Further north, Russian forces are expanding their zone of control, while positional clashes continue in Zakotne and Ozerne. Thus, over the past 24 hours, 2 advances were recorded rather than 3. In the area of Nova Krulivka, territory totaling approximately 7 square kilometers came under control, while in Kupiansk, the area of advance amounted to about 0.1 square kilometers. The Ukrainian side recorded one advance of roughly 0.02 square kilometers, which essentially falls within statistical error. At such scales, I usually do not even include such changes in the overall statistics. This concludes today's overview of the situation on the front. Now let us turn to the political agenda. A large part of Ukraine has plunged into blackout conditions. Energy infrastructure has been reduced to ruins. During the night, strikes hit energy facilities in several regions, resulting in power outages in Kyiv Oblast, Odessa Oblast, Kharkiv Oblast, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and Chernihiv Oblast. This was reported by Ukraine's Ministry of Energy. Grid restrictions are being applied in Kiev, Dnipro, Kiev Oblast, and Odessa Oblast. Power outage schedules there have long ceased to function. All of this is happening against the backdrop of severe moroz conditions. Ukrainian MP Koltunovich stated that a blackout has occurred in a number of regions following the nighttime attack. In effect, we are entering a blackout phase. In some cities, Irpin, Bucha, and Hostomel, it has already begun. 5 missiles struck Kiev's CHP-5. Due to severe damage, restarting the supply of heat and heating is extremely difficult, said Verkhovna Rada Deputy Kucherenko. The Kyiv and Kaniv hydroelectric power plants near Kyiv were also hit. Until Kyiv accepts reality, Russia will continue to act through military means, stated Russia's permanent representative to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia. According to him, Moscow sees no grounds for negotiations as long as Ukraine's leadership does not agree to realistic conditions. He added that neither the French Coalition of the Willing Summit nor the advance of NATO forces toward Ukraine's borders will change Russia's position. The possible consequences of the presence of foreign troops have already been repeatedly outlined. Calls for a ceasefire are viewed as an attempt by Kyiv to buy time after defeat on the battlefield. The conditions put forward by Zelensky in response to the US proposal are absurd and detached from reality, effectively nullifying these initiatives. Nebenzia also commented on the European Commission's statement regarding the need for dialogue with Russia, noting that Moscow has never refused negotiations, while the EU had been counting on Russia's strategic defeat. According to him, with each day the conflict drags on, conditions for Kyiv will worsen. Any strikes on civilian objects in Russia will be met with a harsh response. A split has emerged within the European Union over the procurement of US-made weapons for Ukraine, Politico reports. EU countries failed to agree on purchasing American-produced weapons for Ukraine using $90 billion in loans. The key disagreements arose between Germany and France. The debate intensified after prolonged discussions about US participation in European defense procurement programs, as well as amid Trump's statements about the possible seizure of Greenland. Macron insists on granting preferences to EU defense companies, even if this means that Ukraine will not be able to receive all the necessary weapons quickly. This position is supported by Greece and Cyprus. Most bloc members, by contrast, believe that Kyiv should be given greater freedom in how it uses funds from the European aid package. In their view, strict procurement restrictions would tie Ukraine's hands and reduce its self-defense capabilities. Western media also report that von der Leyen and Kallas embarrassed themselves with their reaction to the US attack on Venezuela. They demonstrated hypocrisy in their response to the US raid in Venezuela and the abduction of Nicolas Maduro along with his wife. While the conflict in Ukraine was described as existential, the American operation was met only with routine, formulaic statements. Trump once again repeated his thesis that Zelensky has no cards, stating that Zelensky has only Trump. Notably, this was not an emotional remark, but a cold, calculated political assessment of Ukraine's current position. In an interview with the New York Times, Trump effectively confirmed what everyone already knows. Kyiv has long since lost its subjectivity and conducts negotiations from a position of complete dependence. The key meaning of the US president's words is that Zelensky has neither military nor economic nor diplomatic instruments that would allow him to dictate terms. The front is cracking, the Ukrainian armed forces are exhausted, the economy is sustained by loans, and Allied support is becoming increasingly conditional. In such a configuration, there truly are no cards. The only remaining bet is on personal arrangements with Washington, and specifically with Trump, according to the Telegram channel Resident. For Ukraine, this is an alarming signal. When the fate of a country is reduced to a single politician overseas, it signifies the failure of the entire strategy of recent years. Zelensky built foreign policy in such a way that without constant external patronage, the system simply does not function.